Why are you becoming quieter around people you used to talk to every day? Why do you sometimes read a message, know exactly what you could say, and still decide not to reply? And if you are starting to enjoy your own company more than certain social gatherings, you might be wondering whether something is wrong with you. Maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe your relationship with people is changing because your relationship with yourself is changing. There is a point in life when you stop measuring connection by how often you talk, how many people know you, or how busy your social life looks. You start measuring it by something much harder to fake. How do I actually feel when I'm around these people? And that question can quietly change your entire social world. After this video, you'll understand why some highly self-aware people gradually pull away from certain relationships, why solitude can suddenly become attractive, and how to tell the difference between healthy distance and unhealthy isolation. Because disappearing isn't always about rejecting people. Sometimes it's about finally becoming selective with what you allow into your life. And the final reason goes deeper than simply wanting peace. Number 1, you start seeing patterns you used to ignore. Why does someone suddenly become difficult to tolerate after years of friendship? Sometimes the person didn't change. Your awareness did. Earlier in life, you may have accepted certain behaviors because you didn't have enough experience to recognize what they meant. You laughed off the constant criticism. You overlooked the friend who only called when they needed something. You excused the person who celebrated your failures but became strangely quiet whenever you succeeded. You might have even mistaken familiarity for genuine connection. But experience changes your ability to connect the dots. You begin noticing repeated behaviors instead of isolated incidents. You notice who listens, who interrupts, who remembers your problems, who only remembers your usefulness, who respects your boundaries, and who becomes uncomfortable when you begin growing beyond the version of you they were familiar with. That doesn't mean every strange behavior is malicious. People have bad days, people make mistakes, people struggle with their own problems. But when the same pattern appears again and again, your brain eventually stops treating it like an accident. And once you recognize a pattern, it's difficult to return to pretending you didn't see it. That's when distance can begin. Not because you suddenly hate everyone, because you no longer want to participate in relationships that repeatedly leave you drained. Number 2, your tolerance for meaningless interaction gets smaller. Why can you sit in a room full of people and still feel like you don't belong? Because being surrounded by people isn't the same thing as feeling connected to them. Psychological research distinguishes solitude from loneliness. Being physically alone does not automatically mean someone feels lonely, and solitude can sometimes provide space for reflection, relaxation, and emotional recovery. This becomes important as your priorities change. You may stop enjoying conversations that revolve around gossip, competition, constant complaining, or proving who is doing better. You start craving conversations that actually go somewhere. Ideas, purpose, personal growth, real experiences, honest questions. And suddenly, a 2-hour conversation with the right person can feel more meaningful than spending an entire weekend surrounded by people who never really see you. Your circle becomes smaller, but your standards for connection become deeper. And from the outside, that can look like you're disappearing. Number 3, you stop explaining yourself to everyone. Why are you no longer desperate to make everyone understand you? Because you've learned something uncomfortable. Not everyone is committed to understanding you. Some people don't ask questions because they want an explanation. They ask because they want something to argue against. You can explain your decision perfectly, and they can still misunderstand it. You can show your intentions clearly, and someone can still interpret them through their own assumptions. At some point, you realize that constantly defending yourself is exhausting. So you stop. You don't respond to every accusation. You don't enter every argument. You don't feel obligated to correct every misunderstanding. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally unavailable. It means learning that your peace doesn't require universal approval. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing and managing emotional information rather than simply reacting to it. And one of the most powerful forms of emotional maturity is knowing when a conversation deserves your energy and when it doesn't. Number 4, Silence starts giving you something people can't. Why does being alone sometimes feel better than being constantly entertained? Because silence gives you access to thoughts you couldn't hear when everything around you was loud. When you're constantly responding to messages, watching videos, attending gatherings, answering questions, and reacting to other people's opinions, there is very little space left to ask yourself what you actually think. Chosen solitude can create that space. Research has linked positive solitude with relaxation, self-reflection, autonomy, and personal growth. So you begin taking walks alone, eating alone, reading alone, working on something without announcing it, sitting quietly without feeling the need to fill every second with stimulation. And something unexpected happens. You begin hearing your own thoughts again. You discover what you actually want, what you no longer want, what you've been tolerating, what you've been pretending to enjoy. And sometimes the clearest decisions in your life don't arrive while you're surrounded by people. They arrive after the noise stops. Number 5, you become protective of your attention. Why do certain people suddenly feel exhausting when they never used to? Because attention is not unlimited. Every conversation requires some level of mental processing. Every conflict takes something from you. Every relationship carries expectations, responsibilities, and emotional demands. Eventually, you realize that where you repeatedly place your attention influences the quality of your life. So you become more selective. You don't answer immediately just because someone expects an instant response. You don't attend every gathering. You don't accept every invitation. You don't keep every friendship alive simply because you've known someone for 10 years. And this is where people can misunderstand you. They may say you've changed. They're right. You have, but change isn't automatically betrayal. Sometimes growing means realizing that the version of you who tolerated everything doesn't need to run your life anymore. Number 6, you stop chasing validation. Why are you becoming less interested in proving that you're successful, important, attractive, intelligent, or needed? Because eventually, applause becomes tiring when you realize it never gives you permanent confidence. You post something. People react. You feel good. Then the attention disappears. So you need another achievement, another compliment, another notification, another person telling you that you're doing well. The cycle continues. But self-respect works differently. It doesn't require an audience. You begin doing things because they matter to you, not because someone will notice. You work quietly. You improve privately. You make decisions without polling everyone around you. And strangely, the less you need people to validate your choices, the less pressure you feel to remain surrounded by people who don't genuinely support them. You don't necessarily become colder. You simply become harder to manipulate with approval. Number 7, you realize you're not disappearing, you're rebuilding. And this is the part most people misunderstand. Why does someone disappear from everyone's life without making a dramatic announcement? Because sometimes the change has been happening internally for a long time. First, they question the relationship. Then they notice the pattern. Then they become uncomfortable. Then they create distance. Then they discover how peaceful life can feel without constantly managing other people's expectations. And eventually they start building something new. A different routine, different priorities, different standards, different relationships, a different definition of success. From the outside, it looks like they vanished. But internally, they may be doing something completely different. They're rebuilding. And here's the important distinction. Healthy solitude is not the same as shutting the world out. If you're withdrawing because you're afraid of people, constantly feeling hopeless, or losing meaningful relationships you actually want, that's something worth paying attention to. But if you're simply becoming more intentional about who receives your time while still maintaining healthy relationships and connections that matter to you, that can be a very different story. The goal isn't to become someone who needs nobody. That's not strength. The goal is to become someone who can enjoy their own company without losing the ability to genuinely connect with others. Because the strongest people aren't necessarily surrounded by hundreds of people. And they aren't necessarily alone either. They simply know the difference between company and connection. So if you've been pulling away from certain people lately, don't immediately ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask something more honest. What am I finally seeing that I couldn't see before? Maybe you're not losing people. Maybe you're losing the need to be understood by everyone. Maybe you're not becoming antisocial. Maybe you're becoming more intentional. Maybe you're not running away from life. Maybe you're creating enough silence to finally decide what kind of life you want. And sometimes the person everyone thinks has disappeared is actually the person who finally stopped disappearing from themselves. If this message gave you a new perspective on your own life, subscribe for more psychology, self-growth, and human behavior videos. Like this video if you've ever outgrown a relationship without hating the person. Comment, "I choose peace," if you're learning to protect your time, your attention, and the person you're becoming. Then share this with someone who needs to understand that becoming quieter doesn't always mean becoming weaker.